All praise is due to Allah, the Lord of the universe, the Master of the Day of Judgment. I bear witness and testimony to the oneness of Allah, to His magnificence, His omnipotence, His might, His glory, to His being the creator and sustainer of all things, the giver of life, the guider of hearts, the Master of the Day of Judgment. I bear witness to the fact that Muhammad ibn Abdullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is His servant and final messenger. May the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him and upon all those who choose to tread His path until the last day. It is said that on one occasion a man comes to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam asking him for counsel, asking him for advice. Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, he narrates this hadith to us. It's in the Sunan of Ibn Majah. When the man asked the Prophet ﷺ for the advice, he says that he wants it to be something that is concise, impactful, something that he can do something with. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he gives this man 3 advices in response to his request for counsel. And firstly, he says that when you stand to pray, pray as if it is your last prayer, as if you're saying farewell. Secondly, he says that do not say anything on this day, today, that you will have to apologize for tomorrow. And then the last, he says, do not have hope in acquiring what others possess. We can look at each of these individually, but in a recognition that quite often so many would come to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam asking for advice in different ways. And in the latter part of this conversation, to revisit that integral part of not just what the advices are and what it is that we take from the best of creation, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but the importance of being an individual that is firstly going to seek counsel in the first place, to then have people in your life that you actually are able to take advice from. And quite often when these things are coming to the Prophet, and we see in the hadith, the responses that he gives are responses that have to deal with a sense of awareness, consciousness, character, conduct, ethics. The idea of a recognition of conviction, belief that will impact perception of how this world is understood. When he comes to him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he is giving him an insight that might have included within it ritual and practice, but it is ritual and practice that is attached to something that is deeper than just the performance of it in and of itself. This first advice that the Prophet ﷺ gives to this man, that when you stand to pray, you pray as if you are saying farewell. Extrapolating from this a recognition of multitudes. That first and foremost, when you come and you're in the space, you are here, you are not elsewhere. Your mind is not something that is distracted and running elsewhere, but you pray both in the form of your body, but as your body goes in the positions of a standing, a bowing, a kneeling, and a prostrating, so too your heart is going in these movements as well. That presence necessitates being in a space where you are centered. You can learn a lot about yourself through yourself. And so the thoughts that come up, the things that now start to distract us, are not necessarily always things that are unimportant. Sometimes they're things that are just poor decision making. So if you sit down to be in a Jumu'ah prayer that is for 40 minutes long and you know that you need to use the restroom and you didn't make wudu or you don't want to redo wudu, that's a really dumb reason to not go to the bathroom. Then you'll be sitting here throughout the course of the prayer saying, he reads Surah Ikhlas. I hope he reads Surah Khalid. But aside from moments like that, quite often the thoughts that come up are things that are of deep importance. The shaitan gets us to a place where we are most vulnerable, the things that distract us. I need to be someplace else after this. There's a meeting I have, a class that I have. I'm having an argument with my parents. I'm fighting with my spouse. My friends are not inviting me to things. The things that start to come up now are thoughts, and you understand that taqwa is not about thinking, because everybody thinks. Right now, you are thinking something. That is not the goal or aspiration. The idea is to be able to reclaim the ability of what you choose to think about, and how, secondly, you think about the things that you're thinking about in the first place. You reframe the paradigm inwardly and allow for yourself to have a prayer experience that is actually prayerful, not rooted in distractions with a dunya that calls you to it and shackles not just your mind, but your heart and your soul. So you put away the distractions, you breathe a little bit, you relax, you recenter, you allow for focus to be something that is not fleeting, but something that can allow for you to say, this might be the last prayer I pray in my life. That's a reality that has to be understood. That we might stand to pray the Jumu'ah prayer in about 20, 30 minutes. And there's a likelihood that if not some of us in this room, that somebody someplace, they're praying their last prayer. They're not going to get to Asr. May Allah make the best of our deeds the last of our deeds. It's not a religion that is afraid of mortality, the way this society teaches us to fear death. But a reflection on death is meant to be something that is a spiritual vehicle that gives you an insight that every breath you breathe in this world is one that you want to have accountability towards. You're not given minutes to just allocate to the spending of things that are mindless. And the ability to have what we call khushu' in a prayer is not something that has to be idealistic. It's rooted in reality. When you are taught to lead the prayer, they teach you that if you make a mistake in the prayer, somebody is going to correct you from behind. The subhanallah comes, you know you should have stood instead of kneel. You can't hear the subhanallah if the idea of focus is that you just can't hear anything. When the hadith tells us that our Prophet shortened his prayer, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because he heard the child crying. He doesn't want the mother to now be in a state of anxiety. He can't do that if his sensory perception suddenly just comes blocked off. That's not the point of it. The idea is to be able to have an attentiveness of the heart. Things can be difficult, especially as you move through phases of what your life brings to you. You're trying to figure out how to pray between meetings. You're trying to figure out how it is to go through different parts of your life. It's not easy. We constantly have conversations that are just superficial. You don't want to believe in a religion that teaches you that when somebody asks you how you are, you just have to say, okay. That's not what this deen is about. Quite often you can be in a place. I had a conversation the other day with a person in our community who I asked, how is it for you when you pray your prayers? We were having this conversation. She said, oh, alhamdulillah, it's the greatest experience. Like really. As he opened up more to himself, he said, it's really hard. I'm the only Muslim that prays in my office. I'm always worried that somebody's going to find me in an empty room and they're going to wonder what I do. And sometimes I think, should I just pretend like I'm tying my shoelace? Should I pretend like I dropped something on the floor? You don't get to have that part of the conversation always. Somehow somebody told you that it's supposed to just be easy to wear hijab. Somehow somebody told you that you're not supposed to have challenges in trying to know how to wash your foot in the sink with a public bathroom. The other side of the conversation is imperative to be able to have that focus that we strive for. A recognition that we adapt to circumstances, but it's not in a place that is chasing after romanticized notions. There's things that are hard, it's okay. There's things that you have to do, that's okay. You don't want to add anxiety to pre-existing anxiety that allows for Shaitan to play games with your heart and have it flutter here and there because you're telling yourself somehow you're a bad person because your mind is telling you you got someplace else to be. That's not the point of it. You allow for yourself to be mindful of the situations you're in. I have a 70-year-old son named Kareem. My daughter Medina is turning 10. They're both great, mashallah. Allah preserve them. We have everybody come in, and if you can move to the side as well and fill up, there's going to be a lot of people coming in this week. Since the time my son was he went any time between 5 something in the morning. Father, Fajr is not what it was when I was somebody who did not have children. And I love my babies. They're the best blessing in my life. My son, when I'm trying to pray, he's moving around, praying next to me. Sometimes he pinches my stomach. Sometimes he'll slap my backside. He literally, one time, was in sujood next to me. And as I'm in sajda, when I get out of the prayer, what am I? Unleash frustration on my child. He's just being a kid. The notion has to be recognized as to what it is, though, that we have aspiration towards. Because we had a Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam who would extend his prostration when his grandson was on his back. Descended from the member to kiss the sayyids of the shabab of our Ahl al-Jannah. You gotta have understandings of Islam rooted in reality. Focus is not about pretending like the world doesn't exist around you. Focus is about letting the prayer be transformational because you have told it it's not something that's an add-on or a distraction, but is the outlet that helps you to understand the distractions in the first place. You find serenity and peace primarily through your self-talk. If you tell yourself that you're seated someplace and it's not something that's of importance, if you tell yourself that it's something I'm just going to do at the end of the day, I'm going to pray them all late. I'm just not going to anticipate the Fajr prayer is coming in. You got to still pray it. No kid is poking you in your stomach or not. The prayer has to be done. You don't chase after the feeling. You pray to the one that told you to pray in the first place. That is a mental exercise, a spiritual exercise. You just let the anxiety out. You situate yourself in an environment that has rest and peace. You allow for yourself to give importance. You recognize that unconsciously the majority of our lives have been spent living in an absence of focus. And the way you can learn anything, so too somebody can teach and structure for you the ability to gain that mental clarity. Our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is telling his companion when he comes to ask for advice that you want to be somebody, but when you stand to pray, you take it seriously with such a mindset that this might be my last. Embedded in that is also a recognition of just how we approach in our tradition death. And you understand that at any moment it's something that can come, regardless of your age, regardless of the place of life that you're in. You don't want to hide away from it or pretend like it's something that doesn't exist. But you get to a place where you can understand it as an opportunity for the enhancement of your celestial self. That I come from a place, and I'm meant to go back to that place. May Allah grant us all entrance into the highest level of His Jannah without any judgment. When I stand in this moment, it allows for me to put things in perspective. I determine for myself, what is all of this about at the end of it? What is it that I'm really chasing after? What is it that I'm in pursuit? So you take a minute. The Iqamah is called. That's why there's silence. You're not supposed to be talking to people, not because you're a bad person if you do, but you hear it and you start to get ready. I'm about to stand in front of the creator of everything. This might be the last time I stand in this way in front of him. My next standing is going to be a day of standing, a day of reckoning, a day of accounting. I just want to stand as best as I can. He's telling his companion, take advantage of this moment. The second advice that he gives is that do not say something today that you're going to inevitably have to apologize for tomorrow. Words are heavily emphasized in our tradition as something that we need to have accountability for. The Quran, the Hadith, they are constant in being able to give a sense of clarity to an individual who has true faith that links the state of their hearts to the mode in which they utilize their tongue. The aspiration is to be somebody who sees truth, and the ability to see truth being intrinsically linked to speaking truth. To be somebody who aspires towards a higher level of ethical conduct. The arrogance is what causes argumentations to keep going. You know that sometimes when you fight, it has nothing to do with what you're fighting about, but you're just going and going and going, knowing that at that moment, all it is not even about saying the other person is wrong, but I just have to be right. Allah protect us from this kind of arrogance. Then in the heat of the moment, the emotions rise and I say things that I know are so purposefully hurtful. I know how to push buttons. I know what to say that's going to get somebody feeling terrible. If anybody's ever done this to you, forgive them. Not even for their sake, but for yours, because forgiveness is for the forgiver. You don't want to carry that toxicity in your heart. It's consciousness and awareness again. What makes you human? Do you think about it ever? Distinct from the rest of creation, you were made. It's not about the color of your skin or your height or your weight or your profession or your wealth. The thing that makes you and I human fundamentally, our religion posits, is the soul that we have within us. The state of your soul, you want to know where your spirit's at? Look at how it is that you treat people. You don't take anybody for granted. That relationship that you have, the one that you can anticipate that maybe tomorrow things will be fine and it's okay for me to just say whatever I say mindlessly. You don't want to be in a place where you learn the value of that relationship because it's no longer there for you to take advantage of. You don't want to speak in such a way where if you don't have the knowledge or the information, that you are in a sphere where you are still just throwing out all kinds of things to people. The default understanding in our tradition comes from a hadith, "Man kana yu'minu billahi wa bil yawm al-akhir falyaqul khayran aw liyasmut," that whosoever is habitually believing in Allah on the last day, let him speak good or be silent. It means that when you open your mouth, you open it to say something good. And the default, the exception is to open to say something good. The default is just silence. You don't have to be talking so much. You think about the impact of words and what those things are. They can be heavy. I had students here who some years ago we took to a MSA conference in Pennsylvania where I was speaking. One of the students that came with us was an international student. She had never been to something like this before. And the country she came from was a place where women didn't even go to Jumu'ah. We have everyone move up. We can just fill in the spots because there's still a lot of room in the space. So we don't have to have people stand in the hallway or kind of go to the overflow room unnecessarily. And this young woman, she was somebody who was just building relationship with her faith. She was coming to a place of recognizing Islam not as an identity variable, but as something that she did, a mindset that she embodied. She left from the lecture hall one day of this conference, and on the way, she told me some days later that she was stopped in the lobby of the conference hall by a young man. She said, as he was speaking to me, there were a group of women standing some feet away, just staring. It made me uncomfortable. When her conversation finished, she went to the restroom and she walked out, and now that same group surrounded her. No salams, no inquiries of any kind of salutations. She said the first thing they said to me was, "Why was that boy talking to you?" She said, "He asked me for directions." They said to her, "Do you think he likes you?" She said, "What are you talking about?" And they said, "Don't think a boy like that would ever be interested in somebody like you. You don't wear a scarf on your head. And he was just talking to you to just kind of have some cheap thrills in the conversation." Instead of going back into the lecture hall, she stepped out of it, walked a distance, and called her mother in another country and said, "Why would anybody talk to me like this?" It is not okay that they spoke to her in that way, which it's not. Sometimes things don't have two sides. Sometimes neutrality is the foolish pursuit. Sometimes things are just wrong. If it's not okay that they talk to her like this, it's not okay when you do it to people also. And here the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam is telling his companion who is asking for advice, don't say something today that you're going to regret tomorrow. Don't say something today that is going to necessitate you having to apologize tomorrow. And that tomorrow is not simply rooted in a literal dunyawi sense, but when you stand in front of the divine, books will be open, limbs will be speaking about how it was that they were utilized. Every single word that was engaged in, interacted with, disseminated not just from a tongue, but from fingers typing. Eyes that will say that I saw what that person wrote in that group message to somebody else. There's no place else to go on that day, that tomorrow, to do or change, because this is the world of exertion. So say good things to people. Give them glad tidings and upliftment. You're going to pray Jumu'ah today with about 500 people. If you walk out of this place without giving salams to one person, something's wrong. If you leave from this place not learning somebody else's name, you want to just settle for yourself and recognize that if it's not Muslims who are saying kind words to people, who else would be doing it? Our Prophet ﷺ was somebody who his nature was that he would lower his gaze. That was what it was. Not in kind of the simplistic way that we understand that phrase today. This was a man, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, with humility. But you juxtapose this now to his interactions with people, that when they would speak to him, not only would he turn towards them, but would bring the entire presence of his physical stature towards them, centering them with the front of his body pointed in that direction. Smiling at everyone, greeting those who are young and old. Follow those sunnahs. When he tells us that the Muslim, man salima an-nas min lisanihi wa yadayhi, is the one who mankind is protected from their hands and their tongues. That's the definition you want to work towards. As you build new relationships and new communities, one of the easiest way to forge a superficial relationship is to have the basis of that relationship be putting down somebody else. It's a lot easier to interject a humor that is baseless, one that lacks ethics and morals at the expense of somebody else. Don't fall into that mess. Don't be the guy that sits around with a group of guys and speaks poorly about women in ways that no man should ever dare to talk about a woman. Don't be in a place where you make any type of ridicule about somebody based off of race, ethnicity, class, any of these things. Say good words. Say things that are going to be uplifting, things that will be positive. He says to this man, when he comes asking for advice, the second thing, don't say something today that you're going to have to apologize for tomorrow. And then the third advice that he gives to him, he says that lose hope in acquiring what others possess. This is a conversation rooted in the ability to have satisfaction in what you have. You don't want to live a life that is in a constant pursuit of feeling inadequate because you are constantly looking at somebody else's possessions and wondering why it is that I don't have those things for myself. All three of these advices are rooted in a mindset that has foresight to it, that plans to prep for a world that comes beyond this one. That's what you got to get yourself ready for. The way that you stay up in the middle of the night to study for something, the way that you plan for a presentation, the amount of rigor that you put into an interview prep process, refining a resume, doing whatever else, the hours you spend when you know you're going to go and meet the parents of your significant other for the first time, and literally every single part of your body is refined to the best of its ability. There's nothing wrong with those things, but if you have the ability to prep yourself in those ways for something like that, then take that practice and make it a means for how you prep for the world beyond this one. One of the easiest ways to lose sight of the blessing that is an abode of Jannah, may Allah make us all people of paradise, is to start fighting over parts of this dunya that aren't even worth it, man. Look at what greed does to people. Literally allows for us to keep children locked in cages at borders, to increase the margin on a basic medicine 1,000 times, leaving nobody with a choice because they just have to figure out how to live. Concoctions that humanity is able to come up with that are so ugly have to be countered with real acts of beauty, that you find satisfaction in what you have. You sit down for some moments, and that prayer that you pray, that you take with a mindset that this might be my last one. You take stillness at the end of it to have account of the blessings, the ni'mas that are given to you on a daily basis. Not because having difficulty is something that you pretend like isn't in your life, but gratitude becomes a vision modifier then that allows for you to see the challenge with a different mindset and gives you a resilience to overcome it. It's purposely made to be simple because any one of us is allowed to be Muslim if we want to be. So the ideas are to just break away from what it is that so many other people chase after and to allow for your hearts to be what is sovereign. And you sit down and you practice gratitude, not looking at somebody else in a way that gives a delusion sense of self rooted in inferiority that says there's no significance to me. You're beautiful because God said He made you beautiful. You have gifts and bounties in abundance. You don't want to spend your time in a place of misery and despair because you're constantly wondering why somebody else got something that you don't have. Take account of all of the things that you've been given, and you allow for yourself to feel then a much needed contentment rooted in satisfaction, because you don't need so much of what the world is telling you will make your happiness conditional upon its purchase. You can find balance through other means. These are three advices that the Prophet gives to his companion. He comes and he asks him, and the advice is given. When you stand to pray, pray as if it is your last. It's something that we're going to pray in just a few moments. May Allah accept it from us. You engage in a mindset that allows for you to understand with a deep awareness now beyond the three advices, in the interest of time, something that's imperative. You got to take time to ask people for advice, counsel, mentorship, regardless of your age. I was in Arkansas yesterday. I flew in and got here 20 minutes ago. In Arkansas, in Little Rock, I don't know if any of you are there, from there, you've been there before, you're nodding your head, you're from Little Rock. No, you're not. It's a very small place. Probably the way you stereotype Little Rock, Arkansas in your head is exactly what it is. I met one brother last night who's an immigrant from India, came to Mississippi in the 60s, and heard from him what it was like, where he literally was in spaces that had entrances for white people and black people. And as I sat and just listened to him and took from him his life advices and his stories, in a place where I went to be the keynote speaker, allowing for myself the ability to take from the elders' experiences, as well as all those who I was sitting there. A second man then came, who also lived in the south of this country his entire life as an African American. Helped me to understand things that I literally will never see in my life. But I have so much that I can learn. It takes a different kind of audacity, unfortunately, to go to somebody and say, can you give me advice? Teach me something. To have within yourself a recognition that not only is there something that I can learn, but I'm willing to actually say that person has the ability to give it to me. Not just in worldly matters. Network with people. Find people who can teach you how to do your job well. You want to have ihsan in everything. People can help you maneuver systems and structures that can get you to excel, but have somebody, places you go, that you can engage and say, teach me how to take care of what makes me inherently human. Teach me how it is that I relate to my soul. If you're looking for a generic starting point, the elders in your life are some of the best people to teach you things. They might not be family members. May Allah make it easy for us, for those who have difficult relationships with family and parents. But individuals that can give you insight, can help you through what it is that they've seen, can tell you about things that are not really that worth it to chase after. When they get to a certain phase of life, they can also give you indication that you wake up to things that are happening because they happened so many times before, and they just continue to happen because people's memory is short term, and we think we know everything, and there's nothing that we have to learn. Why do the companions come to the Prophet and ask him for counsel? Why are we not asking people for advice? This hit me hard last night. And this morning, my flight was at 5-something in the morning from Arkansas Airport. The guy who dropped me to the airport, as we were leaving, he grabbed my hand and he said, Imam, can you give me some advice that I can take with me? And I looked at him and I said, man, I must be getting so old. But it dawned on me that my ability to be able to pass on what it is that I've benefited from so many others necessitates me having to also live a life that has meaning and purpose to it. So that I actually have something to teach to somebody when they're asking me to give them something. You're going to have people that are going to turn to you in that way. One of the best ways to learn how to be for them what it is that they need is that you allow for others to be that for you. You take some time on this day of Jumu'ah to think for yourself, who is it that I can go to take advice from and counsel from? Who is it that I can turn to? It's not just my life is difficult. I didn't even know this guy. I didn't even literally know anything about him. He's just looking for something because that pursuit, that thirst is there. This is what the companions did with the Prophet ﷺ. This is what people who are serious about their state of spirituality would do on a regular basis. May Allah make us from amongst them as well. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله تعالى فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا مولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله. Inshallah, following the Jumu'ah prayers today, we have lunch for the community. So please do stick around for that if you can. Next week, we'll be starting our various halakas, programs, community service initiatives. Make time to partake in these things. You can be around other people who have similar life experiences, an opportunity to deepen in both your own learning, but offering your insights so that others can learn as well. Inshallah ta'ala, as a community, will continue to grow in the best of ways. We sent out a lot of dua requests this morning of people who have passed in the community, people who have illness and difficulties they're going through. Please do take the time to remember them in your prayers, especially on this Mubarak day of Jumu'ah. Allah grant peace to those who have moved on from this worldly existence and entrance into Jannah without any judgment. May He grant ease to those who are facing any type of illness and difficulty at this time. Inna Allah wa malaikatahu yusalluna ala nabi يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد في الأولين وفي الآخرين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم إنك عفو كريم تحب العفو فاعف عنا يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلوبنا على دينك اللهم اجعلنا من المخلصين اللهم اجعلنا من المخلصين اللهم اجعلنا من المخلصين. We begin this supplication in your name, Ya Allah. Beseech you to send your choicest salutations upon your most beloved sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. We ask that you shower your infinite mercy upon this gathering, granting each and every one who is present here and our loved ones only the best in this world and the best in the next. We ask, Ya Allah, that if all of us are meant to be together only at this time, at this place, whether we are young or old, male or female, regardless of our race, our ethnicity, our social class, our country of origin, our cultural heritage, whether we are Muslim or come from a different walk of life, Ya Rabbi, our individual hearts are meant to be in the presence of all of our hearts that are gathered here, only at this time, at this place, and gather us all together again in the best of places in the world beyond this one. Increase us, Ya Allah, in all that is good. Make us from amongst those who take from the blessings of this day of Jumu'ah. Let not this day end upon any one of us without us bringing benefits to some part of your creation. Make it a day, Ya Rabbi, that each one of us finds that moment where our du'as are answered. And in that moment, allow for us to turn to you in ways that we have never turned before. The words that our tongues are sometimes scared to utter, allow for our hearts to speak in the loudest of ways, granting us each and everything that we are seeking, Ya Rabb. And we ask that you put khair in all of it. That for those of us who are seeking companions in this world, Ya Allah, give to us the best companions. That for those of us who are seeking success in our worldly ambitions, our professional life, our studies, Ya Rab, grant us tawfiq in those efforts and grant us the best of success in the world beyond this one. For those of us who are dealing with any life tribulations, difficulties, ailments, illness, any kind, whether those are physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, Ya Allah, give us the healing that we are in seeking of. For any challenge that comes our way, allow for us to meet it with true perseverance and patience, so we can at the end of it reach our potential best and see within ourselves the way that you see us. Protect us always from hearts that are not humble, tongues that are not wise, and eyes that have forgotten how to cry. Forgive us for our shortcomings and guide and bless us all. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم وصلى الله تعالى على خير خلقه محمد وآله وصحبه أجمعين